Oompa-dee-doo. I've got another puzzle for you. Oompa, loompa, doompa-dee-dee. If you are wise, you'll listen to me. Who do you blame when your kid is up? Rat, pampered and spoiled like a Siamese cat. Blaming the kids is a lie and a shame. You know exactly who's to blame. The mother and the father. Oompa, loompa, doompa-dee-da. If you're not spoiled, then you will go far. You will live in happiness too. Like the Oompa, Loompa, Loompa-dee-doo.
Welcome everybody back to another episode of Journey with PKD. Here we find ourselves within a little mini series of the 4 basic functions of myth according to author, writer, professor, scholar Joseph Campbell. And this week's topic is the 3rd basic function, the sociological function of myth. Quick recap, the first function of myth was the mystical experience, that beauty, shock, awe, wonder, terror even, that transports us to another place. It's an actual function of myth. The second was the cosmological, asking the big questions about the universe, our place in it, the natural phenomena we experience along the way, past, present, or future. It's the cosmological. And now we're into the lessons. What's right, what's wrong, what's proper, what's improper. And that helps sustain a society through time, essentially. And starting it off with Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory, that's the most on the nose I could think of in regards to an example of the sociological function, where it's literally spelled out for you in a movie of a lesson or message you should receive. And this is done in several ways in the movie, but you have several examples of it shown where the Oompa Loompas come out and they tell you the lesson you should learn. They pull no punches. They're informing society of what needs to be taken from this, and that is to help keep society functioning within the world of right and wrong. So in the case of kids who are raised improperly, whether they're bratty, spoiled, gluttonous, whiny, they don't pay attention. They're all over the place. They do bear some responsibility, as you see when she falls down the bad egg chute, if you remember the scene well. They do bear their own responsibility. I want it now, and give me, and you see that element. But where does the blame truly lie? It's with the parents. It's with mother and father. It's with how they were raised. Where were their boundaries? Were there not boundaries? What went awry and why? That's the sociological function of myth at play. But really it's at play whenever you see a code or an ethic or a way about a people. So you can take many, many numerous examples of this across all sorts of different fields. You can take assassins, like in the John Wick movies. There is a clear laid out framework for how assassins should act inside the Continental, outside the Continental. Clear territory. If you do this, this is what happens. If you break this, the whole world's going to come after you. That's the sociological function at play. You see it in movies about the military, soldiers learning how to be in their unit. Take Band of Brothers, for instance. What happens when you act accordingly and you rise to the challenge and become a leader, or when you may fall and succumb to fear and go astray? What happens? What's the proper conduct of a soldier? In a movie like A Few Good Men, you can take an actual trial about the ethics of those who thought they were running their unit correctly, a code red. Was it over the line? Did it cross the line to try to achieve a certain goal? What was right about it? What was wrong about it? You, Lieutenant Weinberg, you have these great lines from that movie dealing within the sociological. What's proper? What's improper? In Star Wars, George Lucas made it very clear he was making a morality play, that he wanted 12-year-olds to to experience. Very clear and delineated Jedi, Sith, good versus evil. But even within that, you find his interesting characters like Qui-Gon Jinn, who is within the Jedi Order, obeys the codes of conduct, but also fudges them a little, is rogue, goes off on his own beaten path, injects himself into destiny. There's a scene with Watto where they're deciding kind of Anakin's future and the rolling of a dice, and he's like, no, I'm going to jump in and make sure it's Anakin and his mother, and he's going to insert himself into destiny, which from one perspective is not with the flow, and from another perspective it is. So you have this idea of what's right and what's wrong, and all the different choices people make in choosing their way through their world. Because again, we are these characters, so as we watch them make these decisions, we may think, would I do that? Would I not? What Campbell was bringing across, though, was a little deeper than that. It was more about our connection to continuing as a human species. Star Trek does this very well in its Prime Directive. If you're not familiar with the TV show or the movies, Star Trek had a code and ethics to it called the Prime Directive, which was essentially a non-interference with other cultures. Whether advanced or lesser evolved, you stay out. You don't interfere. You don't tip the scales a little bit. You don't drop off some technology that would help them. Or even if you see something wrong, blatantly wrong by, say, our standards as humans, you still have to allow a process to take place naturally. That's very important. Star Trek actually had as one of its enemies, its antitheses, if you will, the Borg. This alien, tyrannical, totalitarian, coercive force that was the exact opposite of the Prime Directive, that went around assimilating cultures, destroying all those who opposed, and just said, this is our way, that's it, sorry. And you see what happens when these two sociological functions kind of clash. One for individuality, free will of a species, and the other for, sorry, we're not about that, we're just going to take over, and this is what's happening. And you can see that at play. So you've got functions within functions. You've got people asking questions against other norms. So it's not so much that you have to agree with them in different movies or plays or books or things that you're taking part in through art, but it's the idea that you're looking into the world now in realm of right and wrong. This is where the spiritual function is so important in our own lives, because that's where we're really watered with the stories and the myths of how we should conduct ourselves, what the right answers are, what the true answers are. And Campbell mentioned that it's an actual function to do that, to serve that purpose. I know we're in a different world now when it comes to how connected we are with each other. In some ways, we're very connected. In some ways, we're not. And I bring this up because from one perspective, it's kind of sad that we're not as connected with each other as we could be. We have these great technologies and tools, and so in one way, we're more connected than ever. But in another way, we're also more locked in our rooms, not out and about with each other, not connecting with the world organically and humanly. And that can actually be deleterious towards myth, and therefore our human condition. If you take how you connect to your world, right? You start microcosmically and you expand. If you start with just your neighborhood, your town, your city, you keep expanding out, your county, your state, your region, your country, then your world. You will find at these various different levels, there are different ways of communicating what's right and what's wrong, especially when you interact with other cultures, other countries, and as Star Trek posits in Star Wars, other worlds. And when we're on our own, though, so often, just sitting in our own little corners, we don't engage with that too much. We don't connect with what that could really mean. In an age where people talk to their neighbors more, were more involved with local community aspects, didn't just close the door and log on line to something, there was a different way of experiencing where you took information from. If you would listen to your elders, if you would listen to you say your church leaders or your people around you or communities or where you would go for these things. And myth, back in the day, through oral tradition, was passed down, mostly in cultures that were, nomadic in one sense, but would be tight-knit, would be held together. There'd be a cohesion to them in living with your family, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. You knew your neighbors for a long time. You knew the person down the street at your local store. You knew them. You knew their family. You knew where they went to school. They grew up together, who they married, and there was tighter-knit communities. And now, since we do have the ability to travel, fly all around, be somewhere different, we might not necessarily connect in the same way to the stories of old and what's passed down as what is right and what is wrong. And so we're nourished in a new way. We're nourished in a way where we're updating things and trying to keep up with things. And so those functions are still at play, and we tell them through stories. And I just wanted to bring that little nuance up because I think it's important, because it serves the function to sustain society, what is right and what is wrong. And currently we find ourselves now in a time period where there's cancel culture, censorship. If you don't align with the mainstream of thought, you're cast out. You don't get a say. And that's going to affect what people see as right and wrong. To use, again, the Star Trek metaphor of the Borg and the Federation. These things are diametrically opposed, and so there's a conversation being had, and that's going to affect, again, who wins or what happens or how far something goes. That's going to affect how we perceive what is right and what is wrong, and how we actually implement that in our lives, because that's, again, a function of myth. You set the framework, you enter into this world. You maybe have a mystical experience. You try to orient yourself to where you are in the universe, the cosmological function, the mystical function, and now you're seeing what's right and what's wrong. And this can play out in all sorts of ways. So I just wanted to bring that up. Me personally, in thinking about this topic, I found myself drawn to, well, I really connect to what sustains in a collective sense. Well, it's normally with observances and holidays in my own country. In the United States, it's Memorial Day, Veterans Day, July 4th, June 6th, D-Day, December 7th, Pearl Harbor. That's normally when I pause, reflect, have a moment of silence, call a veteran, call my dad, talk to people, read the Declaration of Independence every July 4th with friends and family, where I connect to something bigger and share it with my neighbors and with those around me in a way that really is life-affirming and identity-affirming. Because again, it's the right and wrong of your culture, your society. And every country is going to have something different in society or tribe, but we should remember that that's important to water. The Star-Spangled Banner, the national anthem, whatever country you come from, a national anthem, connecting to it has an archetypal significance to it. There's an importance to it. It helps preserve an identity that you'd want to continue. You can always ask questions. You can always have things debated out. That's very important. Again, it's not the Borg here, but it serves a function to help sustain what's right and what's wrong. In the case of the Federation, to bring that up again, freedom, free will of a species versus, nope, we're going to erase all that. You can take that to today. We're going to burn books. We're going to get rid of statues. We're going to tear down these institutions. We're just going to get rid of it. There's a chaos element that needs to be balanced by order, and they're in constant negotiation. So the sociological function helps serve to maintain that, tell you what's right and wrong. Again, Willy Wonka, here you go. Bad parenting leads to this. Good choices, passing tests, being, as Charlie did, being aware of, I shouldn't steal this. This isn't mine. And you know, Slugworth, I think it was his name, who was the spy. He's, oh, give me the thing. And so tempted by money. We need to be watered by what's right to do. I mentioned in a previous video, because this function really hits with me, do you speak in story? I talk to my friends and family like this all the time. Hey, remember when Anakin was doing this? Or this is kind of where you are in your story at this point, and he made this decision, or don't make this decision, or you're kind of in that die-hard moment where everything is against you and he had to make this decision. And it's a way that we can relate to, again, bring up more examples of what's right and what's wrong and how we can orient ourselves. So there's those two aspects, nuances in everything. To kind of recap, you can take any kind of field, assassins, military, fighter pilots, you can go to Top Gun, what's the code, what's the ethics. You can choose any kind of society you'd like to visit. Take a matriarch society like in Wonder Woman, no men, warring society that's there to protect humanity but doesn't even communicate with the outside world until necessary times. What happens when you need to break out of that? You can look at it in Mafia, The Godfather. What are the rules within family? What's proper, what's not proper? You can look at all these different examples. There's that element, these like subsets. And then there's what sustains you to make it grounded in you, how you go about right and wrong. What do you think is proper or improper? Typically, that's watered again by our religious beliefs and convictions, how we comport ourselves in certain ways. That's why parables are there. That's why these things make us think and hopefully change or give us a direction to aspire to of being better. So that's a sociological function. I hope you all enjoyed. Like, subscribe, and share to this. It really helps get the word out. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, comment below. How does the sociological function affect you? Where are you drawing from? Where do you go to? And how do you go to? And how often do you like to see the right and wrong or the struggle? Sometimes it's not so simple. Sometimes it's complex. And art asks those great questions. It doesn't just give answers sometimes. Sometimes, yes, it's very clear. Sometimes it's that struggle, even when it is clear, that's amazing, and that's an actual function. So as always, everybody, take care, Godspeed, and hopefully wherever you are enjoying your journey. Peace.
Mr. Wonka?
So shines a good deed in a weary world. Charlie! My boy. You won! You did it! You did it! I knew you would! I just knew you would! Oh, Charlie. Forgive me for putting you through this. Please, forgive me. Come in, Mr. Wilkinson. Charlie, meet Mr. Wilkinson.
Pleasure.
Slugworth.
No, that's not Slugworth. He works for me.
For you?
I had to test you, Charlie, and you passed the test. You won!